Superman and Lois, Season 3, Episode 6 of Sound Mind. Clark goes to a group therapy session for spouses of cancer patients. Clark learns about the heartaches of both cancer and chemo through the other spouses' stories and experiences, and it scares him badly. Lois is glad that he's going to group therapy, hoping that it will be something Clark can use to share his feelings about what is happening. Lois meets a new friend at chemo and she hits it off with her, and while there she also gets files from Bruno Mannheim, but it is really just admin files and other stuff like that to throw Lois off of what is really going on. Clark comes in and Lois asks how it went and he says fine, but it just wasn't for him. Lana has to go into work and Sarah is busy studying for school and Sophie is there disappointed because she and her mom were supposed to spend the day together. Lana goes to the office and finds Chrissy there waiting for her to give her information and a statement regarding the new town hall building, which will be named after George Dean. Jonathan starts his internship rookie training at the fire station and has to wear some vintage uniform with the name Rusty on the back of the shirt. General Sam Lane calls Superman to the DOD and reveals a very sick deadline. Superman pays Bruno Mannheim another visit with the sick and dying James DiStefano with Superman, who tells Superman that only Mannheim can save him. When Superman confronts Mannheim with him, Mannheim refuses to do anything for the dying deadline and Superman takes him to a hospital. Jonathan washes the fire truck multiple times and Sarah finds him at the fire station to let him know he is welcome to study with her tomorrow. Once again, Sophie is feeling like she is not being heard by anyone in her family. Superman flies home and tells Lois that Deadline has died. Clark learns from Lois that when James DiStefano got out of prison, he was diagnosed with stage 4 lymphoma. Clark also learns from Lois that DiStefano also had traces of X-kryptonite and Superman's blood in his system. Lois says to Clark, what if all this that Mannheim is up to isn't about powers at all? What if it is something else? Jordan stops a flash flood in Utah and saves a few people, but at the same time gets very dirty and very muddy. Clark starts to get upset until Lois tells Clark that he could go. They both get on to him because he's getting mud all over the floor in the house, and Jordan goes upstairs to take a shower. In the hidden lair bunker, Dr. Alistair Hook has Bizarro Superman hooked up to the machines and tubes to get his blood. Dr. Hook tells Mannheim that the blend of kryptonite and Bizarro's blood has great potential to reanimate cells. Dr. Hook is confident about it, but he says that they could be compromised if Lois Lane keeps snooping around and Superman keeps showing up. Mannheim says to Dr. Hook to focus on the work and that he needs the new serum. Onomatopoeia comes to Mannheim and tells him that they are being reckless and that they only have one more shot to get Superman because they are running out of time. Mannheim tells Onomatopoeia not to miss this time. Kyle and Chrissy continue their romantic relationship and once again end up in bed together, and Chrissy is nervous that Lana is going to find out. Lois is starting to get paperwork and things together, such as her last will and testament, end-of-life decisions, and power of attorney, and other things like that in case she doesn't make it. Clark is in denial about it and won't even hear Lois out or look at the paperwork, which irritates Lois. The next day, Jordan and Clark spend the day at the fortress for Jordan to train on different simulations and villains. Clark makes it more difficult for Jordan and also puts in some hidden things during the training session as well. Jordan takes out the two simulated villains and then gets laser beamed by another hidden danger. Jordan gets frustrated and says all he's done is listen and wait and do simulations. Clark tells Jordan that this is the real world and that is why he has him doing this so he can keep himself and others safe. Jordan gets really irritated and Jordan flies off back home in frustration. Lois and her new friend from chemo go out to lunch at a nice fancy restaurant in Metropolis that it takes months to get reservations to. They both talk about the real realities of cancer and how Clark is in denial about what is happening. She explains to Lois all about the good that has come out of Hobbs Bay and because of Mannheim, how if it hadn't been for her new medical team at Hobbs Bay that she wouldn't be alive right now because her old team missed a lot of stuff. Sarah and her sister Sophie are at their dad's and Jonathan comes over to study with Sarah for their midterms. Kyle goes out for a while and once again Sophie feels neglected by everyone. Sophie leaves the apartment and is not seen again for a very long time. Lana comes by to check on the girls in the studying only to realize that Kyle is not there and Sophie is nowhere to be found. Lana, Sarah, and Jonathan all rally to go find her. Lana stops by Britton Dunn's convenience store to find Kyle there, only he's not alone. Lana sees Chrissy there trying to hide in the aisle over, and Lana realizes what is going on and why Kyle left the apartment and the girls. Kyle tries to explain, and Lana says no need to explain and leaves to continue looking for Sophie. Sarah and Jonathan find Sophie at the old fairgrounds of Smallville, and Jonathan decides to go talk to Sophie by himself. Sophie tells Jonathan that everyone always forgets about her and that no one wants her around. He tells her it's the same with him and his family. What they talk about is real, and what he says to her hits home with her, but at the same time, he's able to make her feel better. Kyle finds Sarah and Sophie there, and Sarah stops him as he sees Jonathan with her. Sophie tells him that his family seems good and that her family doesn't care about her. He tells her that he seriously doubts that, and as he says that, Sarah and Kyle run towards her and embrace her, and a smile appears on her face. As they head out, Kyle thanks Jonathan and tells him maybe it's time they replaced his rusty shirt with a new one. Lois comes home to find an upset Jordan. Clark is also there trying to reason with him, and Lois and Clark finally talk about what is bothering Clark, and he comes clean about what he's been hearing and about the pull to surrender to the disease, and that Lois will give in to that, and also why he won't go back to group therapy, and why he is upset with Lois for doing all that paperwork in case she doesn't make it. Lois tells him that cancer is her villain, and him acting like it doesn't exist is not helping her. She goes for a drive by herself, and on her way out she tells Clark to apologize to Jordan for laser beaming him. Clark goes upstairs and talks to Jordan and apologizes to him. As Clark is talking to Jordan, he picks up with his super hearing Lois screaming for him. Jordan picks it up with his hearing as well and says, "Mom," as he looks at Clark, very worried. Clark tells him to stay there at the house, and Clark flies off as Superman towards her voice. Superman is lured into a trap in Metropolis by Onomatopoeia, who uses his soundwave powers on Superman, which hurts his ears and is having a hard time fighting back. Then there are men with kryptonite-powered laser beam guns, which they shoot at Superman. Superman is left vulnerable and helpless as Onomatopoeia and the men shooting the kryptonite beams at him have him pinned down. Back at home, Jordan is surprised to see Lois come in unhurt and okay. He tells her that he and Clark heard her screaming. She tells him to listen for his father and tell her what he hears. Lois tells him to help and go save his father, so Jordan flies off to his dad. Jordan flies through the night sky in full uniform, listening for where his dad is. Jordan arrives and takes out all the men with the kryptonite guns. He then lands in front of Superman. Onomatopoeia knocks Jordan down with his sound waves. Then one of the men gets up and shoots Jordan with a kryptonite beam. Superman watches in horror, still pinned down by Onomatopoeia's sound wave, and he gets angry and uses his red laser heat vision beams and takes out the guy who shot Jordan, and then, with all his might, uses his speed and strength, punching Onomatopoeia, knocking him back into a wall. Superman runs to Jordan, still laying on the ground, not moving, and finally Jordan takes a big gasp of air, waking up. Superman grabs him, hugging him in relief that he is alive. Jonathan comes home and shows Lois his new firefighter training shirt that says Little Kent, and then Jordan and Clark come home safe and sound, and we, the audience, find out that Jordan is immune to kryptonite. Jordan and Jonathan head upstairs. Clark and Lois talk, and he finally tells her that this whole cancer situation, he feels absolutely powerless and helpless, and he breaks down in front of her, and they both embrace each other as they both cry in each other's arms. Back at Lana's house, Lana and Sarah apologize to Sophie for letting her go through that and making her feel left out and neglected. Sophie and Sarah hang out together. Kyle proposes to Chrissy to be his girlfriend, and Chrissy accepts his proposal. The next day, Clark returns to group therapy for the cancer patient spouses and decides to stick it out and keep coming, and he confesses to the group that he is there to ask for help. Lois has lunch again at the same restaurant she and her friend went to earlier. As she is paying out, she notices a photo on the wall of Bruno Mannheim at the same restaurant. Then we see Onomatopoeia at the underground lair with Mannheim, and he tells him his powers are fading and that Superman is still alive. He takes off his mask, and Onomatopoeia's true identity is revealed, and it is Bruno Mannheim's wife, whose real name is Pia and is Lois Lane's friend from chemo, who she had lunch with. Bruno Mannheim promises his wife that he is going to save her. And that is how Superman and Lois Season 3, Episode 6 of Sound Mind ends. So like the last few episodes of Superman and Lois, this one was very grounded with a lot of real-world situations and things that people go through in it. And those things really suck. So this episode had a lot of real-world aspects in it. Not only do we have the whole cancer situation with Lois going on in this episode, but we also have situations that deal with loneliness, neglect, and learning about being patient and trusting your teacher. In the case of Clark training Jordan at the fortress to prepare him for any possible situation that could be dangerous, and so he can learn how to keep himself and others safe from harm. Plus, we see Clark being more human than we have ever seen before when he attends the group therapy for spouses of cancer patients. We see that Clark is having to face and deal with something that even he, with all his great powers, cannot save Lois from, and that is cancer, and he finally realizes that in a situation such as this, he needs help, and is asking for the group for help. I like these group therapy scenes with Clark because it shows us that even he is vulnerable to fear. He admits his fear to the group, which I thought was very big and brave of him to do, but on the other hand, they don't know that he is Superman either. One thing I mentioned in my last episode review of Superman and Lois was, where is Sophie Cushing? Well, she finally shows up in this episode, and she is not in a good state of mind, and she gets help from the most unlikely of sources. I know this show is about Clark, Lois, Jonathan, and Jordan, and a little bit of what is going on in the Cushing family with Kyle, Lana, and Sarah. They show up all the time, but we only get glimpses of Sophie, salt and peppered in just tiny places throughout the past seasons. Personally, I would like to see some episodes with more of her and a little less of Sarah because, yes, Sarah is a good, compelling, and complex character, but sometimes the character gets on my nerves, and I would like to see some of the things Sophie is into, or maybe an episode where maybe something happens to her family and she has to go to Lois and Clark and the boys for help, and maybe even Superman for help. In this episode, Clark has to come to terms with the fact that even though he believes Lois will beat the cancer, that there is a possibility she may not, and it scares him to the fact that he is ignoring all the things that they need to do just in case. When him and Lois talk and argue about it, we see it finally stick that this is her villain and that she is not all-powerful like him. We also see that both teaching and learning can be difficult for both parties, and I can attest that this is so true. As a teacher and an educator, I have been on both sides of that particular issue. Jordan is eager to get out there and help his dad with saves and to take on some villains. He has done everything Clark has asked and beaten and passed every test and training scenario, but Jordan feels like his dad is holding him back, and he calls him out on it.
He's jealous. He's holding me back.
Clark is just wanting to make sure that he is ready and that they cover all their bases to keep people and him from getting hurt or killed. As far as Clark goes, he's not holding him back, but still he says he's not ready. Plus, Clark and Jordan both still don't know the limits of his powers. I see where they're both coming from, as I have encountered some of the exact same situations in my classroom with my students, except with academic and not fighting and training scenarios. With everything changing with the Cushing family and all the divorce stuff, Sophie is caught right in the middle of the family's turmoil. Lana has her new job as mayor and running the town of Smallville, as well as being a single parent. Kyle has his job at the fire station and lives alone in his apartment and is now in a growing relationship with Chrissy Beppo. Sarah has her schoolwork and her friends and other things going on. With all that, Sophie feels alone and neglected, like she is not even part of the family, that it is just those three and she is on the outside looking in and is desperate to be noticed. She doesn't really run away, but she just goes out to the one place in Smallville that means a whole lot to her and that has brought her joy and happiness in the past. Sarah and Jonathan find her, and it is Jonathan who is the person who helps Sophie talk about her feelings and everything she feels inside and what she is going through. Jonathan tells her that he can relate to a lot of what she's going through and helps her to see the upside of things and that her family loves her and is there for her. I thought this scene was absolutely beautiful. A child and a teenager help each other out, and Jonathan helps Sophie realize that she is blessed with a loving family. I can actually relate to both Sophie and Jonathan when it comes to parts of my extended family and feeling like an outsider or feeling neglected or feeling like you're on the outside looking in. I've been in those exact same situations, and I have felt those exact same emotions. I was glad to see Lana, Kyle, and Sarah apologize to Sophie. One of the things I thought was very intense was how Superman needed help when he was pinned down by Onomatopoeia and the men with the kryptonite laser guns. I was like, man, he's in trouble in this one. And I was like, how in the hell is he going to get out of this one? But it was awesome to see Jordan save him and prove to his dad that he is capable of doing saves and fighting villains. One thing we learn about Jordan during this battle is he is immune to kryptonite, unlike his dad, which really changes the game a lot. But I am curious to see if Jordan is bulletproof or can withstand something like a bomb blast. We know from the end of the last season that Jordan can breathe in space like his dad in Tall Row. But it is weird though that in the first season of Supergirl, she can't fly or breathe in space. When that happened, I was like, what? She is fully Kryptonian, just like her cousin Kal-El. So that still bothers me to this day. I mean, Jordan's only half Kryptonian, and Jordan can fly and breathe in space, and yet Supergirl can't? That's just strange to me. Sorry, I'm getting off on a tangent and a rant. My apologies, people. The biggest what the heck moment was when Onomatopoeia's identity was revealed, and it is Lois's chemo friend and Bruno Mannheim's wife. I was in shock. I never saw that coming. So now I'm anxious to see how all this is going to play out. Okay, that's all I have to say about this episode, so now it's grading time. I'm going to give Superman and Lois Season 3, Episode 6 of Sound Mind a high-flying A+. Here are my final thoughts. This was another outstanding episode of Superman and Lois. The creators and writers of the show are just knocking it out of the park. What is weird is my dad. He doesn't like science fiction or superheroes and stuff like that. And he watched a little bit of this episode, and as it was ending, he said, and I quote, "Man, this show has some really good writing. Whoever does this show really writes great episodes," end quote. I remember looking back at him and thinking, what is wrong with you? Are you sick and running fever? I was surprised he was even watching and that he said something so positive about a show like this. I do hope we see more of Sophie and that she plays more of a part in this show, but as emotional and hard-hitting as this season is with how real they're doing the cancer story, in my opinion so far this is the best season, but we still haven't seen the entire season yet, so I'm going to have to wait and see how the rest of it plays out. But I have a feeling it's going to get even better and better and better, so I have high hopes for it. Okay, that's it for this video. Thank you all so much for watching. I'm going to say good night. God bless. I love all of you. I will see you all in the next video. Bye-bye.